It's January 1978. The letter on your number plate still says S, but the showroom chatter's already looking ahead to T. Cold seats, damp garages, and just enough road salt to ruin your arches by spring. Britain isn't quite ready for the future, but the forecourts are trying. This is Series 2 of 4 Wheels and Fuel. The roads are full of carryovers and leftovers, but a few new shapes are starting to show through the frost. Some are exciting, some are desperate. All of them are interesting. This season, we're going deeper. More countries, more characters, more trim levels nobody asked for. We're starting with 4 cars that didn't wait for permission. These weren't show ponies. These were cars for commuters, young couples, and small families. They were bought in cash, driven hard, and forgotten quietly. But not by us. Some say one was thrown together so quickly the blueprints were still warm. Another strutted around like a shopping car with rally daydreams. A third squeezed itself into a world that had already moved on. And the last one? It borrowed Italian flair and somehow made it Spanish. All we know is they're the Chrysler Sunbeam, the Renault 5 Alpine, the MG Midget 1500, and the Seat 127. 4 Wheels and Fuel is back, and episode 1 begins in Linwood.
Put a Chrysler Sunbeam in your life, and it'll put a smile on your face. It's the car that gives you the glow that will show when you go any place.
The new Chrysler Sunbeam gives up to 50 miles to the gallon. It needs major servicing only once a year or 10,000 miles. And driving it is sheer enjoyment. You can see the Sunbeam at your Chrysler dealer right now.
Put a Chrysler Sunbeam in your life.
Chrysler Sunbeam. In the mid-1970s, Britain's car industry was wheezing. Factories were closing, strikes were constant, and Chrysler UK was in deep trouble. What they needed was a lifeline, and oddly enough, the answer was a small, sharp hatchback built in a hurry and launched in late 1977. They called it the Sunbeam. The project was rushed, really rushed. It went from approval to showroom in under 2 years, thanks in part to a £55 million government loan. The kind of public bailout you could still get back then if your business made something with pistons. Rather than start from scratch, they hacked into what they already had. Underneath, the Sunbeam was basically a shortened Hillman Avenger, but the body was all new, compact, angular, almost modern, at least from the front. The design worked from some angles. Square headlights, tight bonnet lines, and a clean shoulder gave it presence. From the back, things got vague. The tailgate looked like a rush job. Panel gaps varied depending on the weather, but overall, it looked cohesive enough to sell, and sell it did, sort of. At launch in 1977, you could get the Sunbeam with a 0.9, 1.3, or 1.6-liter petrol engine. The 1.3 was the sweet spot. It made either 59 or 69 brake horsepower, depending on whether you had LS, GL, or S money. Rear-wheel drive gave it a strange sense of playfulness for a hatchback. Turn in hard, and it would hold its line with surprising precision, if not grace. Inside the GL, it was pure utility. Door pockets, cigarette lighter, half-clothed seats, and switchgear that could have come from a toaster. But it was all logically placed. The seats were upright but soft. The boot was small, and opened in a way most owners didn't know when buying the car. But the back seats folded down without tools or arguments. And unlike many rivals, it didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. Built in Linwood, Scotland, the Sunbeam also gave that plant a temporary stay of execution. The workers called it the car that saved the factory, though only for a while. Linwood would close by 1981, but for a few brief years, the Sunbeam gave it purpose. What made the Sunbeam interesting wasn't what it had, it was what it avoided. No frills, no fuss, Just a small, British-built car that handled decently, cost little, and didn't fall apart right away. And if you fancied yourself a bit of a boy racer, you'd have to hang on a few more months. The proper street fighter, the Sunbeam TI, was still warming up in the wings. But this one, the base model, it just showed up and got the job done. And in 1977, that was more than enough. Designed in panic, built in Linwood, drove better than it had any right to.
You feel much more alive. You'll enjoy the longest drive. You're never out of place. You got a lot more space. You get a smoother ride. You can take it in your stride. You're traveling in style. It's cheaper now for a mile. Buzzing what you say. In a five, drive a five, come alive. In a five.
Renault 5 Alpine. Launched in 1972, the Renault 5 wasn't designed to be quick. It was designed to be clever. It was France's friendly answer to city chaos. Short enough to park anywhere, tough enough to ignore curbs, and just cute enough to get away with bad decisions. It had front-wheel drive, plastic bumpers, a hatchback rear, and styling like a comic strip. People didn't just buy them, they trusted them. And then Renault made it. Angry. In 1976, someone in Dieppe decided the shopping car needed a stopwatch. The result was the R5 Alpine. Lower, sharper, firmer, and faster. It looked like the standard car, but only from a distance. Closer up, you saw alloys, bigger bumpers, and twin body stripes across the body and above the grille. Because nothing says performance quite like a couple of stickers. Under the bonnet, it had a 1.4-litre inline-4 from the R12 TS, but heavily revised. Hemispherical combustion chambers, a twin-choke Weber carburetor, and a free-revving nature gave it 93 brake horsepower. That doesn't sound like much, and it wasn't. But in a car weighing just over 800 kilos, it was enough to turn hairpins into hobbies. Inside, it was still very Renault. Velour seats, square instruments, the heater sliders made a loud plastic clack, and the radio was an afterthought. But the seats held you tightly, visibility was brilliant, and every surface invited fingerprints. The Alpine's gear lever was mounted down in the floor, short, solid, and properly sporty, unlike the spindly dash-mounted wand in some regular 5s. It felt thrown together, but by someone who cared. On a twisty road, it made sense. You could feel the weight shift, the tires biting, the body flexing ever so slightly as it clung to your decisions. It leaned, but never collapsed. It bounced, but always returned to center. And it sounded like it was putting in effort, which made you want to match it. The Alpine wasn't a trim level. It was a statement. A declaration that even your Grand's hatchback could be taught to snarl. It wasn't just faster, it was funnier, louder, and far less reasonable. And people loved it. Renault sold thousands across Europe. The right-hand drive arrived in the UK 3 years later, and they had to rename it Gordini, thanks to a trademark issue with Chrysler. But the character remained. Years later, after the R5 Alpine Turbo, Renault would take the same shape, shove the engine behind the driver, bolt some arches, and build the R5 Turbo. That became a legend. But this was the start. The Alpine didn't just hint at performance. It proved that even the smallest car could throw the biggest punch. France's first hot hatch, boxed, bad-tempered, and brilliant.
It's got 4 wheels, and reflexes so quick, it almost seems alive. It's perfectly balanced to perform and perform and perform. It's the wide-open sports car, MG Midget. A moving experience. The lowest priced authentic sports car on the market. MG Midget. Strong, honest, fun, young. MG Midget. From British Leyland.
MG Midget 1500. By the time 1977 rolled around, the MG Midget was old enough to know better. It had been on sale in one form or another since 1961, and it wore every revision like a collection of mismatched badges. But the 1500 version, that was the last push. One final lap before the lights went out. Chrome was gone. It started with oversized bumper blocks in 1974, nicknamed Sabrinas after the famously top-heavy British actress, added to meet US crash regs. They looked like afterthoughts and weighed like regret. And by 1977, the chrome was out entirely. In its place, black rubber bumpers that looked like they'd been borrowed from a set of Dodgems. Ride height was jacked up, giving the car the stance of a startled cat. Why? America. The bumpers and raised suspension were designed for federal crash standards. And since the US was MG's biggest export market, British buyers got the same visual punishment, just without the smog gear. Under the bonnet was the 1493 cubic centimeter engine from the Triumph Spitfire. It wasn't fast, but it had more torque than the older A-series lump, around 65 brake horsepower. Not impressive, but usable. And it worked with the 4-speed gearbox, which felt mechanical and honest, even if reverse sometimes needed persuasion. Handling? Still great. Low center of gravity, light steering, and rear-wheel drive meant you could drive it hard and still smile. The rear suspension was leaf-sprung, but predictable. Tires were skinny. Brakes were basic, but the ingredients were right. It wasn't a racer, it was a go-kart with indicators. Inside, it was bare. No radio, no glove box. Just a 3-spoke wheel, Smith styles, and seats that made bold claims about lumbar support. The footwells were narrow. The heater was more theory than function, but none of it mattered, because you sat low, with the wind just above your eyebrows, and the road right there in your hands. The Midget's bonnet lifted normally, not like those show-off Triumphs. The boot held very little, and the soft top required a 3-step folding ceremony and moderate swearing. But every squeak, every vibration, every cold morning start, it all added to the charm. The Midget 1500 wasn't a sports car by modern standards. It wasn't even that quick in its own time, but it had character. And more importantly, it gave people access to rear-wheel drive fun without a second mortgage. You didn't drive this thing to go fast. You drove it to feel something. The last Midget. Big bumpers, compromises, and just enough magic left.
SEAT 127, 140 km/h. Gran reprise, estabilidad. 80% de espacio útil, con maletero independiente o con tercera puerta que lo amplía hasta 1000 decímetros cúbicos.
SEAT 127. In the early 70s, Spain wanted mobility. Fiat wanted licensing fees, and SEAT, Spain's national car maker, wanted to build something people could actually afford. Enter the SEAT 127. It was born from the Fiat 127, a quick copy-paste job. Built under license, yes, but with tweaks for Spanish roads, Spanish fuel, and Spanish expectations. What they ended up with was a boxy, happy, entirely capable little car that somehow became more than the sum of its license agreement. Launched in 1972, Seat 127 kept the Fiat's front-wheel drive layout, transverse engine, and light, cheeky proportions. By 1973, there was a four-door body shell, something Fiat never built. Seat did, because Spanish families needed it. Then in 1977, the Serie 2 arrived. New grille, updated bumpers, revised rear lights. The basics stayed the same, but the look had been freshened. It was still unmistakably a 127, just tidier around the edges. That four-door version looked like someone had stretched a sketch. Short wheelbase, tall roof, four doors and a hatch, all squeezed into something barely longer than a dining table. But it worked. You could get 4 adults in, just about. Maybe a fifth if nobody exhaled too hard. Under the bonnet sat either a 903 cubic centimeter inline 4 with 43 horsepower, or the larger 1010 cubic centimeter unit with 52. Both were mounted sideways, sending their power to the front wheels. Neither was quick, but both were keen. Low weight and tiny tires meant you could pin it through a village and feel like a rally hero. The whole thing felt alive at 30 miles an hour, and if anything went wrong, your uncle probably knew how to fix it, or at least had the right swear words. Inside, it was honest. Plastic dashboard, thin seats, and a gear stick the size of a full-size bat. That's it. The 127 didn't have much inside. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't meant to be. But it was exactly what Spain needed. And 6 years on, it was still delivering. The family hatchback that parked in your heart, and on every street in Spain. That was January 1978. 4 cars, 4 survival strategies. Some bold, some hopeless, all fascinating. Today, most are gone from the roads, but each left a mark on Britain's motoring story. 47 years later, we remember them not for their perfection, but for their flaws, their fight, and their character. Did your family ever own one of these? Or maybe you drove one yourself? Let us know your memories in the comments. And if you're enjoying the ride, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's plenty more metal to come. Next time, we move to February 1978, where the family saloon takes center stage. Bigger boots, longer wheelbases, and dashboards with less switches than sense.